Trades are like one of the most, Brady, you always, I know you don't like to talk about hot seats because, we're talking about people's jobs and livelihoods, and it's fair. Trades too is like, it's like, oh, look at this fun trade. But then you're like, wow, you forget that, this person who gets traded has to like ship their entire family. Like it's like in the middle of the season, get up and like go meet new friends and like a new life. I mean, like you always talk about like you don't want to change school, like you don't want to move your kids, change schools, like midway through the year. I mean, it's sort of the same thing, right? But for professionals. However, having said all that, I'm here for some fake trades. Brady, how come there weren't as many trades? How come we didn't have midseason? Do you like the trade? Do you guys like the trade deadline the way it is, where there's more action, more moving? Part of that is, of course, because you've got salary cap and the CBA and like the construction of rosters makes it easier to trade guys. But it was also like I would venture a guess that we don't see as much action as people are suggesting we could see in a week from now.
I don't think we ever do, because I think you look at it and you say, from the team's perspective, when you have a player, I think there's two rules of thought. One is making this deal when we're giving up a veteran piece that we know can produce. That's why there's an offer or multiple offers for the player. How is this going to set us up? Like, what are we getting back in return to set us up for the future? Because if not, then like we're kind of killing what we've got now, and it surely sends a bad message to the rest of our locker room. Like, that's one of the things I think I get concerned about the Titans moving forward. Like, you trade Kevin Byard. He's one of the best safeties in the NFL, a leader on that team. There's rumors of Derrick Henry, DeAndre Hopkins. You move on from a couple more pieces. It's like, as a player in the locker room, like, shoot, man, all right. Like, what are we thinking right now? And obviously Malik Willis and Will Levis might both play. Maybe one starts the other. We'll see. We'll find out what happens this weekend. But the point is, when the team starts thinking about and making moves, thinking about the future, players then start thinking about the future and what that means moving forward. So I think we tend to not get always, a bunch of action and deals because, you're not at a period of time where everyone might be in on the action and having those conversations for trading for a player, right? It might be only one or two who are in that playoff run that want to make a move, like the Eagles in this case with the Titans. That's one thing. The second thing is, I think it's, becoming hard for players to be able to immediately, adapt to a new system, adapt to their style of play. I think sometimes you see trades happen where, guys know the system. Cam Akers, for example, from the Rams, goes to the Vikings because he knows Kevin O'Connell's system. Kevin was there when they drafted him. So there's familiarity. It made sense. He wasn't working out with the Rams. They had Kyron Williams at the time starting for him. So it made sense. It has to make sense for both parties. And it has to be an easy transition for that player. Otherwise, it becomes really difficult to really make the impact that I think that the team that's going for a playoff is looking for, and also get what you want back in return for the player that's trading on or moving on from that player.
Yeah, if you look at it, and I know you were probably about to bring this up, Will, like we've seen more defensive guys have impacts in trades. Now, we did see Christian McCaffrey, right? But I think he's more of an exception than the rule guy because at running back, I think Kyle did a masterful job in setting him up to make sure he was going to make plays. And he was the focal point of the offense. But we saw last year, right? We saw Roquan Smith. Two totally different defenses, but he picked that defense up really quickly. And I think as a defensive player, right, the terminology is a little bit different, but the nuances of playing defense, I believe the transition is a little bit easier for defensive guys in the middle of the season to do it than offensive guys. Like we see Chase Claypool get traded, still hasn't really played that much in Miami. I know there's a few other names out there offensively. You talked about DeAndre Hopkins, maybe Derrick Henry potentially getting traded. I know Hunter Renfrow is another name. Danielle Hunter is a name, right? Because, Brady, you can speak to this. As a defensive lineman or a linebacker, if there's a certain package for you, right, before you learn the whole defense, there could be a set package for you that you learn that week that'll get you, up the speed in regards to what you need to do specifically for each team. Because each week you game plan for a different team, but there's always mainstays in the defense that a defensive coordinator will call, 3 or 4 times a game. So, like a guy like Danielle Hunter, say Jacksonville, we're looking great for him now. Minnesota winning, that's probably not going to happen, right? We just need you to go get the quarterback, right? Every third down. What we need you to do, right? And as we go on, we'll start adding more on your playbook, right? So I thought what Roquan Smith did last year was unheard of, right? For him to come in, not only come in right away, Brady, but get the green dot too, right? And call the defense, even though Patrick Queen was there. That shows you what type of special player he is. So I think we just haven't seen those trades at the deadline because what Brady talked about, right? You got to think, if you're trading a veteran guy away, what does that say to the locker room? Have you given up on the season? And are we getting the compensation worth this player leaving, right? I thought that was a steal by Howie Roseman, a 5th and 6th round pick, last all-pro safety, and it was a position of need, right? So if you're the Titans, yes, his deal is up after this year, so you get a little something back, but it's just like, with the way there's been so much up and down in the AFC, like you're technically still not out of it this early in the season. What does that do for the morale of guys like Danico Autry, guys like Jeffrey Simmons on the team when you trade one of those leaders away? It has to make sense. Seems like the Titans could potentially be on an all-in, tank situation right now. We'll see what happens after this week, though.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point as far as like situational players, and I think wide receivers, maybe defensive backs too. It's a little bit easier. You're only asked to do kind of certain things. Yes, your calls are going to be different, but like you bring in a wide receiver like Julio Jones, who granted not a trade, but recently signed by the Eagles. With his size, his ability, he's played forever. He's probably a future Hall of Famer. You look at him and you just say like, yeah, dude, go run a go route, go run, slant, all that kind of stuff. Like, especially if you're a team that huddles, like you can just. Or if you're on that sideline, like what was the play call? Yeah, they'll just tell you right there. So you don't have to make it as complicated sometimes.
What we got on here,
it has to be. Yeah, exactly. Like just go ahead and have the sideline yell at him or signal him something. He'll figure it out.
I think the Derrick Henry thing is fascinating though, because so I did Bill Barnwell's podcast earlier today, and we did hypothetical trades, like people who could get traded, and like, man, you start to look around at, like the NFL, and we mentioned that Baltimore and Cleveland could both make sense. Lost your starter, you lose J.K. Dobbins, you lose Nick Chubb, go get Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I pointed out to Bill, and that was Bill pointed out. I countered by saying like you can make the case like Kansas City, Miami. I guess Jacksonville too, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Detroit. I mean, San Francisco would be a stretch, maybe, but like all these teams. I mean. Derrick Henry, like, go get Derrick Henry. Even if you're just blocking the Browns or the Ravens from getting him. Like, what if you Isaiah Pacheco's awesome. But, like, put Derrick Henry on the Chiefs or put Derrick Henry on the Bills. And, you're going to see a lot less too high safety looks if you got Derrick Henry running downhill on your defense, or on that defense, because they're going to have to step in and try to stop Derrick Henry. And that would open things up for the deep ball, particularly for Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen.
Well, you got to look at it like this too, right? And Brady, you know this too. A lot of teams, they don't want to trade somebody within the same conference, especially if you're going to see them later on.
Conference,
or division for sure. Like division trades usually rarely happen. Honestly, if you're a player and somebody trades you within the division, that's disrespectful, right? Because you got to see them at least twice a year. So that's why the TJ Hawkinson thing like surprised me when Detroit traded him to Minnesota, because I'm like, y'all know y'all got to see this guy twice a year, right? Is that how y'all really feel about me? So every time I play them, that chip is going to be on my shoulder. You had no respect. You didn't even have enough respect to trade me in the same conference to another team. You traded me within the division, right? You know how disrespectful that is? So, the Carolina trading to San Fran, Carolina kind of knew they were out of it. So I think that one made sense. You saw Chicago, like, we're not trading him in the NFC. We're going to put Roquan Smith in the AFC. We don't want to see him at all. So I think that when you talk about Derrick Henry potentially going to like the Bills or another team in the AFC, you got to think about the GM and what that means in the future of potentially seeing Derrick Henry, on the other sideline.
Yeah. And remember, too, these are a lot of times players. Talk about Roquan Smith because we're kind of like heavy on him. Use this as an example. But I can guarantee you the Baltimore Ravens had a really high draft grade on him. I can guarantee you, like, they went back, they looked, they said, hey, this is a guy we'd love to have as a part of our organization. They get that second crack when they can trade for him. And then they can work out that extension for a long-term deal. Like, we kind of look at it sometimes trades as being like a one-year rental. Guy's on the last year of his deal. The team gets something back in return. A lot of times, the player standpoint, they're kind of like, hey, man, like, I'm being traded here. Like, make it worth my while. Let me stay here for a couple of years. So,
I mean, the deal.
Yeah, a lot of times it ends up being like the background and history that team has, really dating back to the time at the combine, interviews, maybe pro days, and speaking with the player and really saying like, man, we're not going to have a chance to get this guy. We really wanted to in the draft, but the first crack we get, like, we feel like he'd be a good player for our team.
Brian Burns probably qualifies as a guy like that too, because you're talking about a 25-year-old pass rusher, borderline superstar edge guy, dudes. Like, I mean, there's got to be, if you're the Panthers, and Bill threw this out too, so I don't want to double up on the podcast, but I think it's funny to think the Panthers go back like, hey, Chicago, you guys really need a pass rusher. You want to get rid of that first round pick that
the team they were in talks with last makes the most sense to me, the LA Rams. And they were probably willing to give up 2 firsts. If they're still willing to do that, if I'm the Panthers, I'm jumping on that now. supposedly, I've heard some rumors that they offered him around 25 a year. But if you're Brian Burns and you look at the rest of the defense, there's a few players, Frankie Louvu, talk about Derrick Brown, but you're the guy on this defense. So you've constantly been able to get around 10 sacks a year. No, 25 is not enough. I want 27, 28, $29 million because that's literally what they're paying pass rushers now. So I get him deciding not to, take a lesser deal because, one, you understand. You got a rookie quarterback. You guys have some money. You can spend it, right? You're not playing the quarterback position. So if I'm going to stay on this team and, have to withstand potentially losing for a year or two until we get this thing turned around, I need to be well compensated for it. So, honestly, if I'm the Rams, I think a lot of people are surprised by how they've played this year. Now, they definitely just had a big loss versus the Steelers. I thought they were going to pull that one out, but they didn't. They're competing in the NFC, right? And with the way Stafford's playing with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, I literally would reach back out to the Rams and be like, hey, we need one more pass rusher. We tried to fleece you, not fleece you guys, but we tried to give you good, fair value for Brian Burns. You guys obviously haven't been able to work out a deal. Instead of having to deal with that in the future, why not let us have Brian Burns, right? So I think, honestly, the Rams should reach back out and see if they can get a deal done.
How about Jerry Jeudy, Brady?
It's funny.
Wilson?
Well, I mean, Russell Wilson. I know you got that out
Jerry,
there,
go Jerry Jeudy. Go Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a lot of teams who, do we count the Broncos in the playoff hunt? I'd probably say they're not going to be this year. And so it's probably tough for Jerry Jeudy, even that's the team that drafted him. You'd hope things would work out, but we got a lot of new ownership, new head coach, all those things. But I look at a team, and again, dudes just touched on this. You're not going to trade him within the conference if you don't have to. You're not going to trade him within the division if you don't have to. I would think like the Chiefs would be a team that could use that sort of ability, right? Because even though I think last week you saw like the receiving group start to come along, he's still that guy that kind of has that number one potential to it. And you pair him with Travis Kelce, and that is just a difficult combination to stop. It almost makes it feel like the Chiefs would be unstoppable offensively. So I don't know what it would take to make that deal happen. But if you're the Broncos and you're like contemplating for moving on from him and you're just going to move on from him anyway in the future, why do you care that much where he goes, right? Yeah, if he's ultimately not good enough for you in the future, even if he does go to a divisional opponent, it's like, well, yeah, it's fine. But, he wasn't good enough for us. We'd rather get some compensation back and go somewhere else. But I would think some teams that need the additional help at wide receiver could make some sense. I mean, I'd love to see him paired across from Stephon Diggs, with Josh Allen. Like that would be a nasty duo.
Get Jeudy and Derrick Henry.
Yeah. I mean, Derrick Henry's the other one. Like that would be a fun place to go see him play. Just how more balanced out that offense would be running the football, even though they got James Cook. So can
you imagine trying to tackle Derrick Henry in Buffalo in like January? Dude,
it would just be pain.
Just pain. I would die. I would spontaneously combust. Dudes, what about Budda Baker in Arizona?
Yeah, we'll talk about Budda Baker, but I just want to hit on the Derrick Henry to Buffalo. Let's not forget my guy Deion Dawkins just restructured his contract to free up some money. So I think something could potentially be in the work. I think it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball. Honestly, Brady Quinn, you talked about, the way James Cook has played this year. I think Latavius Murray has given them a little juice at running back. I don't think they're going to add to the running back position. But linebacker, when they lost Matt Milano, they lost a lot, right? Yep. And I think Dorian Williams just went down last week. I think they're going to be in the market for a linebacker. I know we talked about Frankie Louvu potentially being the guy. I think he makes a lot of sense. Depending if the Panthers, he's free after this year, depending on if the Panthers want to get, trade him away. I think he'd be a great fit.
A lot of connections, a lot of connections with Carolina and Buffalo too.
Correct, for sure. Sean McDermott coming from Carolina. Yep. But the Budda Baker one, it's interesting, right? Because he potentially asked to be traded in the offseason. They gave him an extension. So I don't know if he's honestly going anywhere because I don't think you give a guy an extension and then just trade him that same year. I mean, has it happened before? I'd have to go back and look at history, maybe. But I think Budda Baker is going to be part of the turnaround there, right? You don't just trade away talented players, especially if you don't know what you're going to get in return for them. They just gave him an extension. That new team would have to be willing to take on that new money as well, which, again, he's a great player. So I know there's probably some teams that would be willing to do it. I think a team that would have probably been willing to do it was the Eagles, but they traded for Kevin Byard, right? So I don't think Buda Baker's going anywhere, honestly.
Yeah, and if you're Jonathan Gannon, like he's one of the players that, as a defensive mind, like you're like, no, I need this. I need him on my team.
Need him around.
Like, that's the guy I want on my team. Like we build around that guy. So I think that like plays a small part too, right? When you have a new head coach and he's looking at the roster saying like, yeah, that guy's not going anywhere.
And a new GM is like, look, I don't want to suck forever. Like we keep Buda around.